of the global north and the global south, each of those having equal weight when it comes to votes. And the whole thing is premised on the idea that you can set standards that would otherwise, maybe formerly, maybe preferably, have been set by governments domestically or internationally, but they didn't do it. But we're going to set the standards for sustainable forestry and drive change through market pressure and market demand. Whether it has succeeded or will succeed is another question, but it's certainly a fascinating experiment in a new form of politics. And anyone can be a member of the Forest Stewardship Council and have a vote in the General Assembly, from an individual to a huge corporation. Was there something else? Questions? Yeah, we should probably... So just to wrap things up, we have this situation of what we call a perilous imbalance, where Canada's experience of globalization is characterized by rather extreme asymmetries, and these asymmetries cut along a number of dimensions which we've tried to illustrate. But when it comes to the implications for participatory politics, confidence in our elected governments, it's both a good news and a bad news story, and probably up until now there's more bad news than good, but there are a whole bunch of new opportunities or new avenues for citizen engagement transnationally that didn't exist 25, 30 years ago.
Sure. My name is Leslie Hardy, and I have a question with regard to arbitral awards, Chapter 11, and the Canadian Constitution. I mean, how, and I don't know if there are any specific situations where someone could bring, where there's an arbitral award that flies in the face of, let's say, someone's charter rights. And the charter is, I mean, you know, it's the supreme law of the land. How, are there any cases where somebody has tried to say this arbitral award flies in the face of Canada's Constitution and therefore is you know, is problematic?
You go first, I'll say something.
Yeah, it's a good question. There has been one case that was brought and didn't go anywhere. It was dismissed at trial. I'm trying to remember exactly what the nature of the claim was, but it was a constitutional challenge to NAFTA Chapter 11 as, I think, an impermissible delegation of constitutional power, not so much in terms of an attack on the Charter.
Yeah, but that wasn't your question.
Oh, so?
Wasn't your question, were there rulings that violated the...
Well, were there, or do you see an opportunity?
Yeah. No,
or is there an opportunity to use the Canadian Constitution to, because Chapter 11 seems so problematic in terms of just giving, you know, I mean, if the arbitrators are biased and they can make decisions that fly in the face of, you know, democratic legislation by democratically elected governments. I mean, it seems very problematic. And how can we challenge? Are there ways to challenge Chapter 11? Or
yeah. Well, and yeah, so I was going in that direction. It is very difficult to launch such a challenge, because if you want to raise a charter challenge, you have to be able to point to some government action that that violates your rights. And these arbitral tribunals are not considered government actors. That's part of the problem, right? They're making very substantial decisions about Canadian public law, but they aren't government actors. So I'm not a constitutional law scholar, though, and I'm probably not the best person to answer the question. What I know is that there was the one case that was brought, and it lost in the trial, at the trial level, and I don't think it was appealed. And it may be that that legal NGOs are waiting for the right context in which to bring a challenge. There aren't, I mean, for all the attention that we give to NAFTA Chapter 11, there aren't that many decisions against governments yet. It's you know, there's going to be more, I'm sure.
But not against the American government.
Yeah, there have been. The U.S. government has yet to lose an investment arbitration, and that's part of the imbalance that we analyze in the book. And there are reasons why they haven't lost one yet, because the system would come crashing down if they did, and that can't be allowed to happen. But yeah, I mean, even for Canada, it's how many have we lost? 5 or 6, something like that. So it isn't that many.
But Stepan's not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. But nevertheless, I think it's clear that these economic disputes are ruled on the basis of the economic law. So human rights, environmental issues have nothing to do with it, except, but there are maybe some signs of change. And the case that Stepan mentioned about asbestos is very positive, because here was the World Trade Organization accepting the concerns of the French public about their health as relevant. But in this there was a constitutional challenge. I was involved in it, as I did a brief for the case against, arguing that Chapter 11 was a violation of the Canadian Constitution, not the of it. And the best brief was written by André Lajoie, a colleague at the University of Montreal, and you may find this arcane, but I find it fascinating. Her argument was that in 1867, when the British North America Act was written, the previous powers of the colonial courts to rule on disputes about government policies were given to the Federal Court of Canada. For the Federal Court of Canada to lose this power to this process set up by NAFTA without a constitutional amendment having been passed makes Chapter 11 unconstitutional. But the courts wouldn't hear that argument.
Anyone else have questions? So I just had a question. There was we've had a number of speakers here who have been very excited about the fact that we have a minority government and a reasonably united.
Excited or?
Well, they have been excited about it, yeah, and the fact that we have a reasonably united opposition parties that they're willing to cooperate, which is really generous. And the question is if it would be possible to force future governments, if supposing that the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc cooperate, would it be possible for them to force future free trade agreements to be made more transparent and with more input from the public? So make it more democratic.
Well, whether it's a minority government or not, isn't the question, can a Canadian government change what we call our external constitution? And is that?
No, well, I mean, what's done is done, so let's forget about that. Let's think about, for instance, this Canada EU free trade agreement and so on. Can the three opposition parties force the Conservatives to take into account people's opposition and reservations about upcoming free trade agreements? Would that be possible? Or is that just something that you just can't do? Is that a prerogative power of the Prime Minister just can't?
Well, let me try, and then Stepan can correct me or add something to it. I don't think one ever thinks in the parliamentary system that the opposition parties play an active role in government policy of any kind, whether internal or in this case external, negotiating with another country. Normally, now the government might consult, and the government might, especially if it was a minority government, might want to have the support of one or two of the opposition parties to strengthen the legitimate